So we experienced within the first 30 days of the program, we experienced a high level of momentum, resulting in a large influx of new people in attendance. Our people actually had to stand up. They had to stand up and let the visitors or the guests take the seats.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Church Systems Podcast, where we give you simple solutions to help you tackle ministry's toughest challenges. I'm your host, Henry Tolbert, and today we're going to be talking about something that I think is going to be extremely valuable to you. I want to go ahead and warn you, right? I want to really kind of challenge you a little bit today as we talk about wake-up call. Why your church needs a new vision. You know, when you think about a wake-up call, you know, it's some kind of aid or some kind of assistance to help you be awake and alert at the time that you need to. Because, you know, without this wake-up call, you may sleep in or you may overrun your schedule. But, you know, it's funny, I see that when it comes to a wake-up call, there are a couple of different kinds of people, right? There's a person who just wakes up on their own as though the finger of God just touched them this morning and they don't need an alarm. They just roll out of bed and they're fired up and ready to go. Then there's a person who sets the alarm, and then as soon as the alarm goes off, they get up and they get moving. And then there's a person who needs to set 3 or 4 alarms because they're going to hit snooze every time. And it's going to take them a while. Eventually going to get up, but a little bit begrudgingly, they're going to move forward. Now, I don't know which of those people you are, but here's one of the things that I see happening in the church space is that there are a ton of leaders who are in need of a wake-up call, in need of this challenge to come forward and to discover a new vision. You know, so many leaders, and maybe yourself included, you might be operating in a new season based on an old vision. You might be carrying the vision of the leader before you. You might be carrying the vision of the people who are around you. You might be carrying a vision that's 10 or 15 or even 20 years old. But this is an opportunity for you to come forward. You know, did you know that there are a ton of churches who are struggling to grow and they're facing decline? And one of the main culprits is actually their vision. I know it seems simple and I know it seems so elementary, but it's true because a well-organized and a clear vision really becomes a clarion call for your church or your ministry, but also it becomes a tool that allows potential members to really understand who you are, what you're building, and where you're going. You know, sometimes the difference between a thriving congregation and a stagnant congregation is the vision that drives them. And a great vision has a way of giving you momentum and giving you thrust and giving you what you need to move forward. And so today we're going to be exploring why having a clear vision is so important. And I'm even going to give you a blueprint and a framework for how to develop it. So let's dive into it. So let's start with why your vision is so important. You know, this is something that you've probably heard before. You hear people talking about visions and mission statements and all these kind of things. But before I even explain what they are, let's talk about why they're important. Well, one of the reasons that they're important is because without a clear vision, you often find it really challenging to really engage people. You know, you may discover that your congregation is present but not engaged. And you know what I mean when I say that, right? You know what it's like to have somebody who's present and they're physically there, but they're not bringing themselves to the table in the way that you know they could or in the way that you would like them to. You know that they've got specific gifts that aren't being utilized, and they're not being utilized because they're not being made available. And this is one of the things I always say is that one of the greatest abilities, maybe even the greatest ability, is availability. And you know what it's like to have gifts around you that aren't available. And a part of that is attached to having a clear vision. And the reason that it's attached to a clear vision is because people want to be a part of making a difference. People can understand and they know and they can discern when we're just giving them busy work, when we're just giving them something to do for the sake of giving them something to do, but not making them a part of making a real difference. And so when you don't have a clear vision, what ends up happening a lot of times, and I see this over and over again, high capacity people disengage, right? They don't stay engaged because they want to be a part of something that's really making a difference. Another thing that you'll find is that it's hard to, without a clear vision and without people really understanding where we're going, it's really hard to get the thrust you need for new engagements and for new initiatives. It's really hard to build that momentum because people can look at these projects and go like, oh, these are a bunch of separate things. But what are we really doing here, right? It seems like we're all over the place. We're going from this to that to this to that. Maybe even, you heard that before in your church. Maybe it didn't come directly to you. But if it's like, some of the church situations that I know and have been a part of, maybe it goes to somebody else and then makes its way to you, or, and the really good ones, they take it to your wife and then let her bring it, whatever it may be. But you'll find that people are constantly questioning the direction and where we're going. And when they're constantly asking and questioning the direction, they're not moving forward and really engaged in the way that they should be. And another thing, without a clear vision, it's really hard to have the right kind of impact on your community. I know outreach is a big thing, but outreach in and of itself needs to be strategic. It needs to be a part of the ultimate goal. This is one of the reasons that I believe so many churches are disappointed by outreach, is because it's not connected to a bigger vision. If the only reason of the big vision of outreach is we're going to go and do this so people will come to our church, you're going to often be disappointed, because when people come to an outreach, they come to have a need met, not necessarily to join a church or even to, say yes to Jesus. They're coming because they have a need. And so you need to be strategic. And a part of that is having a clear vision. Another thing that's so important about having clear vision is that it gives direction to the church. When you've got a clear vision, a good vision becomes a filter for a church, is that it tells you clearly the things that do and do not fit who you're called to be. If you're not careful, your church can drown underneath the weight of possibilities and ideas. Have you had this scenario before? Somebody comes up to you, you've just preached a sermon, just had a whole service that, was held together by chewing gum and chicken wire, and you did the best you could, and everything is great. And somebody comes up to you after service and says, hey, Pastor, I've got this new idea for this new thing that our church should start. And really what you hear in your mind is, here's somebody bringing something else that they want you to do. Because in a lot of those scenarios, people bring the idea. They don't necessarily want to execute it, but they think you should, right? Because you don't have enough to do, right? And but that feeling of somebody coming and saying, hey, let's add this new thing. And you're sitting there with the big picture thinking, well, we've got a whole bunch of current things that need some more attention, that need more volunteers, that need more of all these kind of things. Well, here's the beauty of a clear vision. When you have a clear vision, is your vision will serve as the filter for you. Your vision can serve as a filter. Your vision, when it's clear and it's focused, it can say to those projects that don't fit that, hey, this is not a good fit for where we are right now. We don't have the manpower, the energy, the effort to put into it. Even if that person wants to do it themselves, if it doesn't fit, it's a filter for you. But it also gives you something that allows you to say yes. So if it pours into what you're trying to do, it can become a yes. It can become all of those. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, when I was pastoring, I started this initiative, this vision, this kind of multi-year vision called 1 Year, 1 Mile. And our goal was to have an impact on the community around our church within 1 mile, right? And so when somebody came, they said, hey, let's do this project at this place. Is it within 1 mile of the church? No. not a good fit, right? Conversely, when they say, hey, can we go to this school and be a part of this program? Is it within 1 mile? Absolutely. Let's go and do it, right? It became a filter. And that's the good thing about a clear mission and vision, right? And many churches are facing these same kind of common challenges where they're sitting in there going, how do we do this? How do we combat our declining attendance? How do we pull back in disengaged members? People need to be a part of something. I used to get in a lot of trouble as a kid, and I know you're looking at me and you're thinking there's no way, I am a model citizen and I'm walking with the Lord. Well, I used to get in trouble as a kid. And for the first couple of years when I would get in trouble, I might get, sent to the principal's office or whatever it is. And so one day, my counselor said, hey, I'm going to get you tested. I want to test you for something. And I didn't know what she was talking about. I didn't know what it was. All I knew is that she was pulling me out of class to go and sit in a room with her and to take this test. And she promised me snacks and candy. So I was like, all right, cool. And so I remember going and taking that test. And she was really testing me kind of for special needs, for talented and gifted program. Because what she discovered is the reason I was getting in trouble is because when the teacher would put work in front of us, it might take the rest of the class 45 minutes to an hour, and I would be done in 10. In 10 minutes, I finished my work, and now I'm sitting there idle, and I would start reaching over and, talking to classmates and all this kind of stuff like that. And really what they discovered is I was bored. I wasn't being challenged. And that's the reason that I wasn't really engaged in the way that I needed to, because the stuff that they were putting in front of me, it just wasn't challenging me. And what I'm saying to you is you may have some disarray and decline in your church because people aren't engaged, because you need a vision that gets them excited about being a part of it, that gets them excited about going forward. Jesus cast a vision. Jesus says to the first disciples, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. And to these men who have been fishing and catching nets full of fish all their lives, he says, imagine if you could do that with people. That's an exciting vision. He cast that vision and it makes all the difference. And because they catch that vision, that's one of the things that really helps to draw them in and takes them to the next level, all right? One of the things that we do to solve this problem is we do something called the mission makeover. And with the mission makeover, we jump on a video call with a senior leader and we spend about 45 minutes to an hour. And we just walk through a series of questions. We record that conversation. And then after our conversation, we break down all of the things that we talked about. We go and we scout your website and your social media pages and all those kinds of things. And we condense it down into this one document. And in this document, we really come in to answer the critical questions that help form your vision. I believe that there are 4 critical questions that you need to answer if you want to build a strong and fruitful vision. And I'm going to walk you through these 4 questions, but I want you to take some time and I really want you to think about these, right? Because this isn't something that you'll just do, in 30 minutes or an hour or a week even. This takes time. It takes some time for you to really think about it, pray through it, get some other people involved, but you need to answer these 4 questions. So let's walk through them, all right? Question number 1 you want to answer is, what makes us different? What makes our church different? Now, I don't mean just what makes you different from the church down the street, right? What makes you different from the church that's in a different denomination that's over in your community? I want you to think culturally is what makes your reason for existing different from the other businesses and the other organizations all around you? What makes you different? This is not about competing with other churches. We're all in the kingdom and we're all playing for the same team. We should be moving in the same direction. So it's not about competing with other churches, but it's really figuring out where you fit. It's figuring out how you fit and why God has placed you in the specific culture that he's placed you in. You've got to figure that out. And so you want to ask, what makes you different? It's been my experience that when I go into different churches and organizations, every organization has a unique reason for existing. There's something about that, right? There are a bunch of different questions that we ask in this, but a couple of things that we look at is we look at what's really the thing that sparked, that originated the call for this church to be in this community. I remember when I first got into ministry, when I had just finished college. I was actually in late college, and I remember having a conversation with one of my teammates about the Bible, and he just talked about how complicated it seemed. And when he said that, it bothered me because I always saw the word as so simple. Well, at that moment, calling and vision and a unique identity was being birthed in me. Is that one of the problems that I felt like I was created to solve was the problem of people thinking that scripture was complicated. I wanted to let them know, and I wanted to show them that it wasn't complicated, but instead that it could be very, very simple. Well, what's the unique bend that you have in your ministry? What's the unique thing that God has called you to do? You go to some churches and their identity is wrapped up in worship. They know that, man, if we can get people into the presence of God, it'll change them. Others are wrapped up in education. We want to make sure that they know that they learn. Others are wrapped up in community. We got to get them in a small group, right? And all of those things are right. But what I'm asking you to really uncover is which one you're most driven towards. What makes you unique? What's the unique thing? What's the unique experience that people get when they come to you? We recently built a website for one of our new partners down in Fort Lauderdale. And one of their themes is loved, not judged, is that they're creating a space where people with troubled past can come and find a home. Like, that's a part of what makes them unique, is that they're not concerned about how you dress. They're not concerned about what you wear. They're not concerned about the mistakes that you've made in your past. They're very focused on telling the stories of people who once were this, found Jesus, and became this. So what is that for you? What makes you and your church unique? This question is helping us uncover our mission statement. I believe that when it comes to the mission statement, every church has a similar mission statement because they're all built around the Great Commission. But you need to figure out the language that uniquely expresses what makes you different. You need to figure it out, right? We can look at all these different mission statements, and I probably memorized too many church mission statements, so I kind of tell on myself there. But love God, love people, serve the world, so that people far from God can be raised to life in Christ, to make, develop, and empower, transform followers of Jesus. All of these things are the unique way that churches communicate how God has made them different and why they actually exist. That's what you've got to answer. Why do you exist? Why does your community need your church there? Why is it so important that you be there? And when you clarify that in your mission statement, when people come to your website, when they come to your social media pages, when they peek into your live stream, they should be able to tell that you are adding some value to a community and that it is worth coming to be a part of what God is doing through your church. You've got to be able to answer the question of, this is why we exist. That you got to be able to say that this is why we're here. This is what we bring to the table. And so the first question you've got to answer is the question of mission, which is, what makes us different? Number two, the second question that you got to answer is, what matters most to us? What matters most to us? When we talk about this, we're really getting ready to dive into your values. And I want you to think about what values, what traits, characteristics really matter most in order to help you accomplish the vision that God has given you. If I use the example I shared before, if we're creating a space where people are loved and not judged, then they may have a value of acceptance, right? They may have a value of honesty. You've got to be willing to give people space to be honest about their challenges, their struggles, where they are with God. If you're going to really be able to love them, you've got to really get to know them for who they are. And so what are the characteristics and traits that really you want to see be elevated as a part of your culture. I know we want everything. We want all the gifts of the Spirit. We want the fruit of the Spirit. We want all these different things to show. We all want to be loving, and we want to have integrity, and we want to work hard, and we want to do it together. We want to do all these different things. But I'm asking you, I'm challenging you to just highlight 3 to 5 of these traits that really stand out and you want to see stand out as a part of your culture, right? Because some of these are going to be things that you're currently doing. And, 1 or 2 of these might be what we call aspirational, meaning that you haven't gotten there yet, but it's where you're trying to go. But I'm challenging you to think about 3 to 5, and I know for some of you that's going to be hard because you can think of 20 different traits that you want to have right now. But here's what I can tell you. If you put 20 of anything in front of somebody, they're not going to take it. I love to tell this story. Years ago when I was in college, my wife and I, we got matching pugs, his and hers pugs, right? And at the time we were just dating. So I had a boy, his name was Legend. He lived with me, and she had a little girl pug whose name was Sparkle, who lived with her. We got them from different places and different litters because we knew that someday, we were going to want to have a bunch of pug puppies. And that didn't work out great, but I'll tell you about that later, right? But I remember when I first got my pug, when I first got Legend, and he was so small, I could hold him in one hand. And I remember I got him a big bowl because I said he's going to grow into it. And I was a college student, I was being a little bit lazy, and I filled up his bowl with food and I put him in front of it, and he looked at it and he whined and he ran away. And so at first I thought nothing of it. I thought maybe he's not hungry, he'll eat later. And then I just went on from it. And then maybe a day later, the next day, LaToya comes to my apartment. I said, "Hey, I think something is wrong with Legend. He won't eat." She said, "Where's his food?" And I pointed to it, and she looked at me with a look that said, like, "Are you serious?" She said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What do you mean? I put the food in there." She was like, "That's too much food. He's not going to eat it because he sees that it's too much." I was like, come on, surely he's not thinking that much. He's a puppy. He's like 2 months old. He's not that smart, right? So I took his food, I dumped it back in the bag, and I dropped 2 to 3 little kernels of dog food into his bowl. If you wouldn't believe it, he started eating as though he was starving because he had not eaten all day. And I learned a valuable lesson there. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes less is valuable. Not just because we want to exclude and want to take things out, but we want to move at the pace that would allow the people around us to be a part of what we're doing. And I'm only mentioning that because when you go through these values, you need to make sure you squeeze them down to just 3 to 5, because you would rather have 3 values that people actually live out versus having 20 values that nobody pays attention to. And so you really want to lock in to making sure that you're condensing this down to the best you can, because this is all about you defining your values. You're defining that these are the traits that are important to us. For people who are a part of our church, who are a part of our team, these are our values, right? This is what it looks like for this to work. This can be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be a sentence, whatever they are, you want to have these values, right? Let me say this before I go into the third question. Don't underestimate the importance of your language, right? Of the language of your church culture. How you say something is very important. How you say something is very important. I could take one value and say, I could put it in one word and say fun. That's one of our values. Fun. We fun. We have fun. Fun is our value. Or I could take that same value and turn it into something that says, we stop to celebrate every time we see God do something amazing. Or we value spending time together outside of church, right? Like all of think about the language. How can you say these values in a way that really communicates the full idea? Sometimes we read one word, it's left up to interpretation. But when you put more around it, it gives a little bit of context to it, and it helps make a difference. But you want to make sure that you outline those values. So you've got to figure out, question number 2, what matters most to us, all right? Question number 3, one of the things that we want to step into now is we're going to ask this question, and this is so important, right? I want us to get this because this is really going to be a game changer for you, is how will we develop people? This is the place where I see so many churches fall short. There's no plan to develop people. There's no plan for what happens with people when they show up. There's no plan. We hope and pray new people come, but we don't have a plan for them. We don't have anything in place that says when they get here, here's what we want them to do so that we can help them stay here. And we've got to develop that. You've got to ask yourself, how will we develop people? Your church needs a simple, there's that word again, a simple disciple-making process. You know, in this world that is so caught up with the glitz and the glamour, and we can get so caught up on our music, on our worship teams, on our lights, on our graphics, on our screens, on our LED walls. We can get caught up on our parking lots, on our buildings, on our facilities, on our budgets. We can get caught up on all those different things. But we must never forget that the mandate is to make disciples. And I'm concerned that we're so focused on making attendees that we have forgotten about the importance of making disciples. And we've got to have your church, please hear me, I'm pleading with you. Your church has got to have a simple disciple-making process. You've got to have a process in place that says when a person shows up, here is how we put them on a journey to become disciples. Now, I know that discipleship is a lifelong thing. What I'm telling you is start the process. Start the process and give people the vehicles that they need to actually walk through the process. Because here's the reality. Let's trace this down. I want you to think with me for a moment. Let's put on our thinking caps and let's be solutionists for a moment, all right? And if we're going to be solutionists, we've got to learn to really dissect problems. So let's break this problem down. If you don't make disciples, you won't have consistent attendees. Right? Because a disciple sees church different than an attendee, right? And if you don't have consistent attendees, then you won't have volunteers, right? Because a volunteer has now taken the next step to say, I want to be involved. I want to go from wearing a bib where I get fed to wearing an apron where I serve others, right? And so if you don't have volunteers, though, you don't have a pipeline through which you can pull potential leaders. Some of your best leaders come from your volunteers who are already in the culture, who are doing the things that you're coaching and instructing them to do. But if you don't have volunteers, you don't have a pipeline for leaders. And eventually you'll hit a point where if you don't have leaders, you don't have the capacity to move things forward. And so let's chase it down. What ends up happening? If the start of it is this, you need to make disciples. If you don't make disciples, you don't have capacity at the end of it to actually expand. And so it becomes a circular kind of existence where not making disciples eventually leads to an inability to expand. And when you can't expand, it actually can sometimes even cause even more discouragement to keep you from really making disciples. And so what you've got to realize is you need a simple process. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be hard, right? One of the foundations of disciple making is knowing how. It's just figuring out, how are we going to do this? And that's the question we're going to ask. How are we going to make disciples? What's going to be our simple process, all right? And I encourage you to map out a simple 3 or 4 step process, all right? I'll show you an example by showing you what Jesus said. Matthew 4:19, he says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. That's what Jesus says, right? So Jesus makes that invitation, but his invitation is actually a process. He says, step number 1 is you've got to decide to follow me. That's a function of the head. If you make the decision, that's going to start the process, all right? So the start of the process is for a person, for these disciples to say, yes, Jesus, we will follow you. All right. That's step 1 in Jesus' process. Number 2, he says, I will make you, right? So if you follow me, decision of the head, he says, I will make you. That's a function of the heart. He says, I'm going to work on your heart. I'm going to work on you a little bit at a time. I'm going to take responsibility for helping you become who God created you to be. That's phase 2 of Jesus' discipleship process. He says, first, choose to follow me. You got to decide that you want to be in this, that I didn't force it on you, that you chose it for yourself. He says, and then once you chose it, that means you're going to commit to letting me do my part. So you're going to let me keep working on you. You're going to keep on walking with me. And as we're walking together, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to show you. And then phase 3, he says, I will make you fishers of men. That's a function of the hands. He says, if you decide with your head to follow me, I will work on your heart. And you're going to know it's working because what you do with your hands or what you do with your life, the way you live is going to change. Jesus lays out a 3-step process. What's your simple process? How will you help through your simple disciple-making process? How will you help people come forward? How will you help them grow in their relationship with Jesus? How will you help them become disciples? And this is outlining our process. What is your process? How does a person come in? How does a person get involved? How does a person take the next step? All right, this is so important. I don't want us to sleep on this because so many churches miss out on amazing people because you have a secret process. You have a secret process. And when I say secret process, what I mean is that even if you have a way for people to get plugged in and to people take next steps, it's not widely known. It's hidden behind this insider language. It's hidden behind these things that other people don't know. You know, I went to go and visit a church. My wife and I we were on this journey and we were really searching for the first time in almost 20 years to just be a part of a church, like not lead a church, but just be a part of a church, be a part of a team. And as we started visiting all these different churches, we did it as anonymously as we could. But as we went around to these different churches, I was listening for stuff just like this. How do we get involved? And I remember one particular church that said, hey, if you want to be involved in this, go and see Sister, I'll just call her Mary. Go and see Sister Mary after church. And I looked around and nobody flinched. And I remember sitting there thinking like, this is my first time here. How in the world would I know who Sister Mary is? Right? And it's that kind of insider language, right? And you don't even think about it when you've been in it for a long time. But really, when you put together a process like this, if you want that process to not be secret, you've got to embrace the awkwardness of talking to people that you know like you don't know them. That sounds really weird. I'm going to explain it. But it really means that you come into a room with, let's just say 50 people that you know, and there's one person that you don't know. And so you explain everything to the 49 like you're talking to number 50. It's another way to leave the 99 to go get the one, as Jesus said. Like it's not just physically leaving where I am to go to where that lost sheep is, but it's really figuring out maybe it's not a place of physical leaving, but it's a place of understanding, right? Leaving the understanding that we all have together and going to the place of misunderstanding where the one is and speaking to them so they can be involved. You want to have a clear process. You know, here's another reason that you want to have a clear process. If you don't have a clear process that you communicate to people and invite them to come in and be made disciples. And I'm saying make disciples because I believe within that is church attendance, is going through a new members class, is giving, is serving, being a part of a team, is being a part of a small group. All of those are part of discipleship. But again, here's another reason that you really want to make sure that you get this right, that you do this, that you dive into this. Not only are you running the potential of missing out on some of the people that you want, that you really want to serve, but if not, you'll develop a culture of favoritism. A culture of favoritism. And here's what I mean, is that in the absence of a process, really your only option is to promote and elevate and develop the people that you know and like. I know I just said something hard, but it's the truth. You end up developing and leaning on the people you know. And before you know it, you look up and you realize you involve the same small group of people in everything you do because there's no process that helps you to see, here's how we should intentionally be focused on getting as many people involved as possible. All right, that's question number 3. Question number 4 is how do we measure success? Our process we use is called MVPs, right? You know what an MVP is, the most valuable player. So we kind of took that, but it means mission, values, pathway, signs. And that's what we're talking about in number 4, signs. How do you measure success? What's a win? How do you know when people are actually embracing becoming disciples and embracing the vision of the church? How do you know? There's been a whole lot of talk about goals, and it's very warranted because goals make a huge difference. Goals give us a target. Without goals, anywhere we end up can be wrong, and anywhere we end up can be right. If I said we're going on a road trip, but I don't set a destination, any town I end up in, I can say, you know what, this is where we're meant to be. Anytime we end up in, I can say this is the wrong place. A goal helps differentiate the destination from every other possible destination, right? And so one of the things that you want to have is you want to have the goal. But here's my problem with the church and goals, is that it feels like we've fallen into this fallacy where we only measure goals by numbers. We think that it's just butts and budgets. It's nickels and noses, that those are the only things that we measure. And so I want to challenge you to look at your goals differently. I want to challenge you to look at your goals in a different way by setting your goals as behaviors. I want to challenge you to set your goals as actions that you want to see people take, right? When you think about goals as behaviors, really what you're saying is it's not about how many people show up. It's about what kind of people show up. That the how many will come, and we'll get to that, right? But it's about do I have the right kind of people? Are we doing the right thing? Are we creating the right kind of people? Because you could have a room full of people who have no integrity. You could have a church full of 1,000 liars if you want it. You could have a big group of people who get together, but they're not advancing the kingdom. And so what you want to focus on is you want to make sure that you're setting the culture and the expectation that here is who we are. So you're asking yourself, what are the practical actions that we want to see people take on a regular basis? What are the things we want to see people do? What are the ways that people, that we'll know that people are really catching the vision and really, really embracing who we are? This is clarifying your signs. This is you saying, this is what it looks like when things go well. In this age of technology, we use GPS to go everywhere, and I'm guilty. I use my GPS when I'm going to places I've been 1,000 times, right? Because GPS doesn't just show me the route, but it also shows me traffic, right? And so I like avoiding traffic jams, right? It's one of my things. I kind of think of it as a secret superpower, right? I want to avoid traffic jams at all points. Right? But here's what I know. If all technology went away today and all we had were the highways as they are currently set, I could find my way to almost any major city in America. And you know how I would do it? I would just follow the signs. The signs would tell me if I've got a general direction, a general sense of the direction I'm going in, the signs will tell me when I'm going in the right way. The signs will tell me Birmingham, 15 miles. The signs will tell me Houston, 37 miles. The signs will tell me when I'm getting close and when I'm moving in the right direction. And likewise, you want to set up the signs that tell your people when they're moving in the right direction. Years ago, one of the core values of a church that I pastored in Huntsville was diversity. We were a diverse church that was planted that way by another planter, and it was racially diverse, it was economically diverse, it was generationally diverse. All those things were a part of our signs, were a part of our core value, rather. And so as a sign, one of the things that we embraced was diverse dinner tables. That's what we called it. We called one of our signs diverse dinner tables, because what we were trying to say is one of the ways that we know people are really grabbing a hold of our vision and really grabbing a hold of our values is they'll know it's happening when they're sitting and having dinner with somebody who is different from them. That's a value. We know that people tend to colonize and jump in silos with people who are like them. And so we wanted to be intentional about saying, you know what? I want to have dinner. I want to have somebody at my house for dinner who's in a different generation, who might be in a different race, a different culture. They might be in a different economic status, whatever it may be. We want to have that. We want to have, that was a huge thing for us. So what are the signs? What are going to be the things that are going to let you know that people are really catching the vision, that they're getting it? Right? You know that feeling as a pastor when you look and you go, man, they really got it. They finally got it. When you see somebody is getting it, it makes all the absolute difference, right? So when you think about this, here's your framework for developing a clear vision and getting started on this. And I want you to take some time and I want you to wrestle with this. You've got to develop your mission. You've got to figure out what makes you unique and why you're there, right? You're likely in a town or in a city where there are hundreds of other churches, where there are hundreds of nonprofits, where there are hundreds of businesses, where there are hundreds of other things going on. Why does God need your church to exist? Why does he want your church to exist? Why does that community need your church to exist? You want to figure that out. You need to understand your values. What's important to you? What are the core values that you want to exude? When people show up to church, you want them to feel what? What is it that you want them to feel, that you want them to grab a hold of, that you want them to have an experience with? How do you want to see people describing the church? Oh, that's a loving church over there. Oh, that's a church, man, they really support you, man. Oh, they really genuinely care about, what do you want people to have? That's going to be your values. Number 3, you need to ask, how will we make disciples? That's your pathway. What's the journey that you want people to go on? And I often describe this and I draw it out as a loop, right? I draw it out as a loop that people can kind of follow and go on so that they understand every step in the process. How does a person go through? All right, they come to visit church, then what? They go through that step, then what? They go through that step, then what? What is the process that you want to walk people through? And last but not least is your signs. How will you know that people are getting it, that they're catching the vision, and that they're moving forward into what God has called them to do? All right, you heard it from me. Let's jump. I want you to hear it a little bit from somebody else who's had a chance to be boots on the ground with it. One of the challenges that you might be facing, it's not necessarily that you're not the right leader, and it's not necessarily that you're in the wrong place. You just may need some more help or another way of looking at the vision that God has given you. And that's what the wake-up call is really about. It's about saying we want to do what God has called us to do. And it's not asking, can we do it? But it's being so determined that we ask, how do we do it? So I want to kick this off, not just by talking to you about the theory, but I want to show you a real life example of what it looks like when a leader makes up their mind. And this leader I'm going to introduce to you is somebody I've gotten to know. I'm excited to introduce you to Pastor Romanda Maxwell. Hey, Pastor Maxwell, how are you?
I'm good, Pastor Henry. How are you?
I am awesome. Thank you so much for taking time to be a part of this. It has just been amazing to watch what God has done there at New Life in the City in Melbourne, Florida. But I want you to talk just a little bit. Tell me, I know we've been partnered together for just a couple of months now, but what prompted you to kind of take the next step and really take initiative to really start moving things forward with the church?
Absolutely. First, I want to thank you for having me and bringing me in on this podcast. I was that one that was asking the question, how are we going to step into the next, and what is it that's needed to do that? And so when we met, or when I was invited to one of the leaders in the city that you were hosting one of your seminars, when I attended that meeting, it was like a aha moment for me. It was like, this is the next step. This is what the Lord is leading us to do in order for us to go from where we are to where we desire to be. So it was like the answer to me, seeing you and hearing what you were saying and how you was expressing your program and talking about the system that you have there. And so I knew it was the answer, and that's why we moved so quickly on it. We didn't waste any time because we knew that was it. I knew as a leader that was the answer I was looking for.
I remember doing that seminar. I was standing there and I was teaching, and I'm like, man, who is this lady who is shouting me down over here to the left, right? And I'm sitting there in my head, I'm like, she getting it.
No.
Like something in this is agreeing with her. And to your point, you guys did. I mean, that next week, just a couple days later, y'all were in the program. But here is one of the most impressive things. And I don't know if I told you this yet, but you all worked through the material in the program faster than anybody ever have in the entire history of our program. And I'm serious. Like, y'all were coming back like, oh yeah, we did this. I'm like, y'all did what? Right? And y'all walked through all the stuff. And the beauty of it is it felt like you guys had an urgency because you knew Easter was coming. You knew there were opportunities coming. And as a result, you guys saw some fruit faster than anybody I've ever seen. So talk a little bit about what were some of the most impactful and helpful things that you guys saw, but what were also some of the results that you guys saw come out of our partnership?
Well, as a matter of fact, we moved so quickly because, like I said, we were waiting on the next thing and how we were to move. And your program provided that for us. So we experienced within the first 30 days of the program, we experienced a high level of momentum, resulting in a large influx of new people in attendance, including the fact that as you mentioned, it was Easter weekend coming up, I believe, but we were hosting two main events that our church really catered to. And that's our Family and Friends Day, as well as the Easter program that we were looking forward to. So the program definitely contributed to the overwhelming response. I mean, because it got to the point where in our services there was standing room only. We didn't have any chairs. Yeah, it was like that. Our people actually had to stand up. They had to stand up and let the visitors or the guests take the seats. Two of the main things that we implemented or we saw that really worked for us in helping us to see this result was your assimilation system and the evangelism system. Those two systems played a key role because they are kind of like the first two things that are on the program that you really introduce. And so we jumped on those. And we just hit it, boom, 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 put things into place, set it up. We just followed the instructions. We followed the system. And it worked for us. It yielded optimal results. I was taken back. It was really very exciting.
It was phenomenal. And one of the things that was so encouraging is that you and one of your leaders who works really close to you, from where we're sitting, it looked like the two of you did the bulk of the legwork to start implementing this stuff, right? Just like, and I know there were other leaders involved, but the two of you did it. And I thought that was so encouraging because it really shares that it's not about the size of your team when it comes to implementing some of this stuff. It's really just about their drive. And one final thing that I would love to hear you talk about is, I know that, the world is changing and evolving in some ways. But there are still some pockets of ministry where it can be challenging to be a woman in ministry, right? To be a woman as a pastor, whether that's being a part of denominations, being a part of programs, all of that kind of stuff like that. What has been your experience with just how, you've been able to integrate not just into the program, but into our community, into the other people? Like, what's been your experience? And what would you say to another female in ministry who's where you were, who's saying, man, I'm looking for our next. I know that there's more that God has put inside of us. I know there's more he wants to do. I just got to figure out how to get there. Like, what would you say to them?
I would strongly encourage them to lean on their support system. One of my main, I could say, one of the biggest advantages that I have as a female pastor is that I have a support system because I am a leader, a female leader that's married. So my husband, believe it or not, has been a major source in helping me to develop my gift, because it's to him, it's not so much about gender as more than it is the call of God that's on your life. the anointing and what God has created you to do. And he's not afraid to push me. And fortunately that I did come from an organization that does believe in women pastors and really help to cultivate um my call. And so
Mm,
that has helped me a lot. And God has surrounded me with people who really see the sincerity and recognize the gift,
mm,
and just are there to support. I would say lean on your support system. Let those be the ones that see who you are, what you have to offer. Let them be the ones who just really help to push you forward and be your encouragement. Because
mm,
sometimes, if you're listening to outside sources and what others are saying and what the world is saying, it can be discouraging, because
mm,
you got some people who just really don't believe that women should be in leadership at all.
mm,
And so you have to just really fight against that, and don't let that get to you, and just continue to press forward, knowing that God has a plan and a purpose, and continue to seek it out, because he will reveal it to you.
mm.
Either you get an invitation, somebody will call you, you will see something, you will hear something, and eventually you will lock hold to the thing that you're designed to do, to take that next move in ministry. Don't give up. If I
Yes.
could say anything, just stand your ground.
Yes.
Stay the course.
Yes. Thank you so much, Pastor Maxwell, or Pastor Mandy, as Apostle Brown likes to call you. And then shout out to Pastor Anthony, because he truly has, I've seen that he is a great support system. And I just love how he supports you. And that's encouraging. And I love to see that. And I too want to say to any pastors watching, whether you be a male, female, wherever you are, you're called of God. I want to encourage you to receive this wake-up call, receive this moment in time that I believe is a Kairos moment, that is a clarion call for you to step up to the plate and to say, not can I, but how will I? Can I is questioning whether it's possible, but how can I recognizes that it's possible, but it's on a journey to figure out how do we make it probable. I believe God wants to do it in you, and I want to encourage you to lean into it. So to summarize, what we're really trying to say, and what I'm really trying to drive home with you, is that a clear vision can really be a crucial component to helping you move forward and to helping you take the church to the next level. With our mission makeover, when we work with our churches to do that, one of the things that we're doing is that we're not just creating a document, we're not just creating a piece of paper. What we're doing is that we are even in some ways prophetically speaking into the future that we know we see. One of the things that I love most about working with church leaders like yourself is that we have this natural and innate ability to live based on what we see on the inside until we see it on the outside. And I think that's one of the calls of leadership, especially church leadership, is like a Moses. We receive this vision from God and we walk as far as we can to seeing that thing come to pass. And if you want to get some help and you want to take that next step and you want to get your vision together, you want to get it tight, don't hesitate, reach out to us and let's connect, and our team will help walk you through the mission makeover. I know that God wants to do something special in your church. And if you're ready to revitalize, if you're ready to re-energize, if you're ready to relaunch your church and take it to the next level, then you can visit us on our website and learn more at getchurchsystems.com. Well, listen, I hope this has been a blessing to you, and I look forward to our next episode. In our next episode, we're going to be talking about locking the back door, how to keep new people. We're going to be talking about retention. So make sure you subscribe, stay tuned, and until next time, keep the gears turning.